Yeah, that's just dumb. Oh. There it is. Okay, that works. Yo guys, what is up? Max on our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my full build guide for Hailey. Now, I put out a showcase yesterday with 2 catalysts on. I was still tweaking the build and figuring things out. We've now had more proper time to test her out and fully catalyze her, and now in this video I want to showcase and demonstrate why she is so freaking strong, if not the strongest bossing Descendant that we have in the game now. We'll be breaking down everything that you guys need to know. I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So the very first thing to talk about is her reactor. Your ideal reactor is going to be a piercing light mounted reactor with chill power and singular power boost ratios, and then ideally your god roll substats are going to be damage to Colossus and skill crit hit damage. I have neither of those things. We could be doing multiple millions more. The most important role is going to be the damage to Colossus. Prioritize that over everything else, and then getting crit damage if you can is fantastic. That is going to be your best in slot reactor role for bossing. Currently, you can't really farm a great reactor for Hailey because obviously you're going to want chill and singular and high power rounds. That just doesn't exist to farm this week. If we check next week's schedule, next week, which is on Tuesday, in the Fortress, there's going to be a chill high power rounds singular reactor dropping. So it should be really great next week. Hopefully it's in a good spot to farm for it. But right now, pretty hard to farm for her god tier reactor. Next week will be really easy. But that is something to keep an eye out for when that happens on Tuesday. So I went over her abilities yesterday. I'm not going to go as quite in depth as I did on yesterday's video. So if you want to check that out, I'll have a link in the description. But one thing that's really cool that you can do on her that I didn't realize, and a big kind of interaction on getting the most damage out of her, is kind of 2 things. One, while you're in your 4th ability, you can just hang out here. You can activate your 3. So you can start getting your cryo buff to deal more damage and get more crit chance. You can also activate your 1 and hit things. The reason you want to activate your 1 is if you're getting swarmed by enemies and you're using this in a mobbing situation, you can just quickly click the 1 and it'll hit enemies to the side of you, and you can kind of clear the way a little bit. But the big thing that you're using this for is to apply that debuff that the Destroyer has on them. As you can see, they've got this kind of thing on them, and those are cryo stacks. They just kind of wore out, but as you see, I'm shooting them, they're still cryoed. And a big part of increasing damage on Hailey is, 1, you want to be a large distance away from them, 25 meters or more. You're going to be getting 50% more weak point damage on them, which does apply to the 4th ability. The other thing that you're want to be doing is making sure that enemies that you're firing at with your 4th ability or your 2nd ability are cryoed. Cryo is a unique debuff to Hailey that allows her to stack up cryo stacks, and if an enemy is cryoed, they're going to take 50% more damage from your abilities every time that you shoot. For example, with the 4, you're going to remove 1 stack of cryo. So if you just use the 2 before you enter a boss fight, you're going to apply a potential of 7 cryo stacks. You have a max of 9. With the 1, you can apply 9 more. And so if you're ever kind of shooting at an enemy, you're just going to want to make sure that they are cryoed, because otherwise you're missing out on a massive damage increase for yourself. And if you don't cryo them, or you're shooting at something for a long time in the 4, you can always just hit the 1 and re-cryo them. It's pretty nice. The next thing to talk about is piercing light versus afterglow. Getting a lot of questions about, can I use the Afterglow on her? The answer is absolutely yes. However, piercing light is significantly better, and that has to do with its base damage. the biggest thing that Hailey cares about for the weapon that she's holding when she's activating her fourth ability is the base damage of the weapon. And right now, the Piercing Light has the highest base damage that I can find. I even checked rocket launchers. Piercing Light just has the highest base. It is a fantastic weapon for her. But just to give you an idea of the difference, so right now I'm holding, you do the Afterglow first. I've got no mods on for this test, so just doing like just general weapons versus each other. On a non-crit weak point, we just hit for 548k. Now we're going to swap to our Piercing Light, which once again has 0 modules on it. We're going to reuse our 4, and I just hit for 1.1 million. So I am just out of the gate doing like double damage with the Piercing Light. It is something that you're definitely going to want to invest into and build. Yes, the Afterglow absolutely works, but the Piercing Light is significantly better. And so if you're really trying to maximize your damage, you're going to want to invest into the Piercing Light for sure. Now for the modules on the Piercing Light, there's a really key concept to understand with how to properly build Hailey with this. And that is her 4 is shooting her sniper rifle. Your base damage of this ability is the base damage of your sniper rifle. Things that increase the damage instance of your sniper rifle will make the ability damage scale higher off of that. So you want your like weapon that you're holding to hit as hard as possible, and then you're going to get your like skill powers and skill increases and skill crit to scale from that, and then get additional damage on top of that. That's part of the reason why this hits so hard. And a lot of mods work for this because a lot of mods will just increase the damage of the gun that you're holding and make it hit harder. So things like rifle reinforcement, action and reaction, your crit mods, you absolutely want the sniper to be critting, crit damage mods. And for our solo play, we're going to be using weak point expansion. On weak point hit, your weak point damage gets plus 140%. This does work for this ability. Obviously, it's got a cooldown. So I've got this as our like solo build. If you're wanting to just hit bosses for a metric F ton of damage, I would recommend using weak point expansion. You can use real life fighter. I don't prefer it over weak point expansion. The other mod that you can use, this is like the exact build, but you can swap to special sight for group play. Group play just means that ideally when you're playing with teammates, bosses have more HP, so they don't go down as fast. You're not going to be like two-shotting them. So special sight gives you 30% more weak point damage on all of your shots because you're not aiming in her 4. And so this is like a little bit more consistent damage, but right now with the damage that we're outputting, weak point expansion, in my opinion, is the best mod because it allows you to hit, because we're only shooting like once or twice, one of those shots is getting a ginormous damage increase. A few things that I found from my testing did not work. One, strength in first shot does not work. Elemental damage does not work. It seems like it's a separate kind of damage thing from your actual damage of your sniper rifle. So the like elemental damage doesn't scale the 4 higher. If you wanted to fully catalyze this Piercing Light and because it kind of came with this root tile slot, the thing that I would be adding to it personally would be Focus Fire. This gives us 20% more weak point damage and more crit damage with our sniper rifle. And so if you wanted to fully catalyze this, which I still need to do, I would just put this last mod slot to Focus Fire. Now for our actual Hailey build, I've got 3 builds to go over. We've got the group play build, the mobbing build, and the boss Deletus build. Boss Deletus is going to be your highest damage. But for a lot of the like clips in this video, was actually using the group play build. And part of the reason for that is just Hailey hits for so much damage that it's actually kind of okay to go for a little bit more quality of life and a little bit less damage on her. But I do have a setup that's like pure, just raw, hit as hard as possible. But the big difference between group play and boss Deletus is the group play build has double cooldown mods because we're trying to, if for say we're in a group and a boss goes immune, or, the boss doesn't immediately die from your abilities, you have the cooldown to use your abilities again. Hailey doesn't really have much going on besides her like damage from her abilities. So getting cooldown on them and maximize conservation is really nice because, for example, the 3 is a massive damage buff. You want this up 100% of the time while you're fighting bosses, but it's also a huge drain on your MP. So things like maximize conservation are really quality of life for keeping up your mana, and it also drastically reduces the cost of your abilities. For example, your 2 ability goes from costing 60 mana to 47.8. So this is the group play build. I'm going to like not hover my mouse anywhere if you want to just look at this. And this is kind of the quality of life build. Obviously, I haven't fully catalyzed her yet, so I need to fully catalyze Nimble Fingers so that Spear and Shield can be fully ranked, and then we're going to get a little bit more defense. But there's a few interesting decisions that I've made here with modding Hailey that I want to break down. Now, one of the big decisions that I've made across the builds, besides the mobbing, we'll talk about that in a second, is the decision to not go for modifier. And the reason for that is because Hailey has a butt ton of modifier. She does not need more modifier. For example, if I add a singular specialist, right? Singular specialist gives me 76% increased modifier. This does not function the same way as base damage or power. Modifier is straight additive. So I am going to get 76 plus 3,612. So I'm getting 3,680. In the grand scheme of things, me adding this mod is around a 2% damage increase for something that cost 16. I can put on Spear and Shield, which is a much larger damage increase because it's going to be increasing the power of the damage that we're getting from our reactor. And this is multiplicative, and it costs 6 at most. Obviously, we want to rank this up more to get more defense, but things like Glacial Succinctium that give you chill skill power and more just raw damage are going to out damage things like Singular Specialist that are giving a tiny little drop in the bucket on our damage multipliers. The other thing for this boss Deletus build that we're going to be using is Shot Focus. Shot Focus, while not really doing anything for the 2, definitely increases the damage of the 4 because it's going to give us even more damage from our firearms. And once again, the reason this is so good is because we can afford to lose a little bit of modifier on Hailey. She doesn't really need much more. She already has great values, and there's so many other mod slots that can give us so much more value than having 2% increased damage. Now, one thing to point out here in particular with the build that I am rocking, specifically to me, is that I have crit chance on my reactor. So when I am activating my abilities, let's get this to 16 stacks real quick. But as you'll see, my skill crit rate is going to go up, and it's going to hit 100% chance. I am getting 100% chance because I have a crit chance roll on my reactor. If we take this off, for example, real quick, Now we get to 86% skill critical hit rate, which is obviously a fantastic amount. But if you don't roll skill critical hit rate on your reactor, I personally would probably swap out Glacial Succinctium, in my opinion, out of these mods for skill insight, just because you are going to want to get to that 100% crit chance. Bosses have crit resistance, so just because you have 100% crit chance doesn't mean you will be critting 100% of the time. You're going to want to give yourself the most consistent damage results, and that 15% chance to kind of miss a crit is definitely going to be hurtful. So in my opinion, you would just, because they're the same polarity, you would just polarize this to a V, and then you could swap this for skill insight, and then you're good to go there. But I wanted to point that out because it's something that's a little bit different about my setup. I don't need more crit rate. It would be a waste, but you might need it if you don't have it on your reactor. I just want to quickly mention why I was doing different things for different bosses. So Hailey's got kind of 2 damage rotations, in my opinion, and it depends on how tanky the boss is. So for example, on my 21 million damage shot against Pyro, I did a rotation where I used my 3 first. You always want to use your 3 first for her. And then I went into my 4, which with my 4, my whole goal was to down the boss. So before I shot the boss, I used my 1. The 1 is going to apply cryo and make our next shot's damage deal 50% more. So we're basically guaranteeing a down on the boss. And then I canceled my 4, and then I used my 2. The reason I'm using my 2 later is because I am trying to hit the boss with Dangerous Ambush. The 2 has the highest flat damage. It's going to hit the biggest numbers. And so this is the skill that we want, Dangerous Ambush, with its 50% like damage increase to hit with. And so we're using the 4 to down the boss and then the 2 to deal the massive amounts of damage. If a boss is not going to die in 2 shots, because obviously after you use the 4 and the 2, you're kind of on cooldown. If the boss is going to be tankier, something like Swamp Walker, then you want to do the kind of the opposite rotation, where you pop the 3 first. You're going to use your either, I mean, you can always just use your 1, but you use the 2 first to hit the damage, apply the cryo stacks, and then immediately go into the 4, where you've got a lot longer damage time. You've got 7 shots. You can have 8, but on like a boss that's not going to die super quickly, that's the rotation that you do. And then you've got like more damage uptime, but not quite as much damage burst, if that makes sense. And that's why you saw me do different things for different bosses. For the mobbing build on Hailey, I originally set up her abilities, and kind of the idea that I had was just to make the 1 hit as hard as possible on a low cooldown, scale a bunch of modifier, and try to keep this up with her 3. But what I ended up, after a bunch of testing, is that she is like kind of one of the best gun descendants right now. Cold Fury gives you stacking up skill critical hit rate, which is fantastic, but it also gives you stacking up flat firearm critical hit rate. This is more crit rate than like Valby or Enzo gives, and you get a 20% firearm critical hit damage increase, and keeping this buff up is a massive improvement. The other thing that Hailey does, and the other part of the cryo rounds that we kind of talked about, is its ability to apply cryo. Now, cryo is great for making Hailey's skills deal more damage, but it also makes her guns deal more damage. And so the build that we've went on her is, rather than trying to scale up the 1 to deal as much damage as possible, we've made it so that she has basically 0 cost of her skills. As you can see, right now I've got the 3 active, and it's like hardly draining any mana. We could change this to drain like absolutely 0 mana. For example, if we just quickly changed MP Collector to Energy Collection, real quick, now it simply just won't drain mana from us, even while we're in combat and like shooting something. Basically, you have her 3 up infinitely, which is pretty fantastic. But the thing that I wanted to show you here is what the 1 does for her guns, because it's kind of insane. So we saw that it gave us 50% more damage, right? And it actually makes her guns hit like twice. So I'm just going to change my Thunder Cage to our like ignore tab, where we've got no mods. Just going to shoot this enemy. We want to be at the exact same distance with Hailey. So let's stand on this. We're going to shoot. We're doing like 23,000 damage. 23,663. That number's not going to change. We're going to apply cryo now. So now this enemy's crowd, I get 9 shots of them with this buff. And now I'm getting 50% of my damage that I'm shooting as an extra damage hit. So you're like, for more like slow firing weapons like the Nazastras or even the Thunder Cage, where you're just like kind of peppering them while you're shooting this thing out, you're getting all of your hits to deal 50% more damage. It's just cutting it in half, and it scales with the damage that you're dealing. So obviously, if you put on a build where you're dealing a bunch of damage, then this buff becomes more and more helpful. And so the setup that we've gone with is basically just running around spamming her 1 ability at literally all of the enemies, and having 0 mana drain while you're doing it, and then you're able to just buff the daylights out of your weapons. For example, right now, my Thunder Cage is 99.96% crit rate. My Piercing Light has 100% crit rate. My Nazastra's Devotion has 100% crit rate. You can kind of take this setup and bring it to, you know, any activity. Yes, you're going to be a little bit slower while you're moving around with Hailey, but you're buffing your weapons a ton, and that's kind of the way that I set her up for this. Now, we do still have 1 slot left on this. I haven't fully catalyzed it. So if you wanted to make the 1 ability do more damage, you would go for like a Dimension Specialist, or Focus on Dimension would be a fantastic last mod here. I've gotten the cryo rounds to hit for over 100,000 damage a tick on our like previous build, but I just kind of think that she works better just focusing on guns and being like a gun descendant with that. And also, obviously, you still have the 2 and the 4, which are going to be on extremely low cooldowns. and we've still got focus on chill to give them a bunch of extra damage. So you're still able to use your skills, and you won't ever like really run out of mana because they're going to cost so much less. So some key mods here are maximize conservation for a bunch of skill cost, strong mentality for more skill cost, shot focus for more damage with our guns, our double cooldown mods, MP conversion, and nimble fingers. We've got some quality of life by getting some defense for some extra survivability. Not something you like absolutely need, but you know, for mobbing, I wanted the extra defense, focus on chill for some more cooldown and the more damage of her abilities, and then HP. Energy collection is something that you could swap out for MP collector. If you get hit, your energy stops regenning. So MP collector, like in terms of, I've just been standing here. My mana hasn't gone down a bit. But MP collector is better at regaining health. Energy collection is also really good, but technically, I think MP Collector is the slightly better choice here because you'll be able to regain mana on kill, which is quite nice. And then, obviously, that last mod, you could go for some Dimension Modifier to make the one hit for harder, but super interesting build. Obviously, we don't have Hailey's Transcendent modules. I think those are probably going to help her with mobbing quite a bit, but this is a very well-rounded gun build that you could literally just put on any gun, give it 100% crit chance, give it 50% more damage, and call it a day. And the last thing to talk about is her components. For her bossing components, you absolutely want to use the Slayer set. Slayer set not only gives you 26% more skill power, but it also gives you more rounds in the magazine, which directly contributes to potentially getting an 8th shot out of her 4th ability, which is really, really cool. So Slayer is perfect. It is going to hurt your survivability a little bit, but you know, you're getting so much damage and so much utility out of the Slayer set. On terms of like the rolls you're looking for, I have pretty garbage Slayer rolls, but you're gonna look for MP recovery out of combat so that you can like pre-click your 3 and stack it up. You're going to want MP recovery in combat on your Slayer sensor and max MP. That is not the Slayer sensor that I should be using. Something like this, I just have max MP, is going to be very nice. On your Slayer memory, you're going to want MP recovery modifier so that you can sustain more memory. And if you can hit like a defense roll on here, that'd also be fantastic. And then lastly, on your processor, max HP and max shield is kind of what I would recommend going for. For mobbing, I'd rock the 2-piece set from the Polar Knight set. This gives you 6% chill skill power, which is very nice. You don't really need to rock anything else because she's kind of already capped on like skill crit chance and weapon crit chance. She doesn't benefit from duration. She doesn't need more like shields. So you can kind of just wear whatever you want in the other 2 slots. If you really want to try to like min-max her mobbing build, there is the Glacial set. I'd recommend wearing the Memory, which gives you max HP, and then the Power, which gives you max shield. 2-piece set of that would give you Chill Skill Power Modifier. I definitely wouldn't recommend wearing the like 4-piece set of this because it's max shield, HP, and defense. I think you just lose too much survivability for mobbing, but you could get a little bit extra damage there. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new about Hailey, and I know that the grind for her as a free-to-play player absolutely sucks. I did put out a video kind of in a longer discussion about my thoughts on that if you want to check it out. But, you know, I did spend money to play her, and I have been really enjoying her. I think she's very well designed and just borderline very powerful. So yeah, guys, that was the guide. I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.